Chosen one, your soulmate screamed their love for you in front of everyone. You won't believe what happened. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this fictional, faith-inspired story begins on a day that no one believed would become unforgettable. Stay until the very end because what happened next changed everything. Something huge is waiting for you. There are moments when a heart grows tired of carrying the truth in silence. There are moments when fear loses its grip, and honesty finally becomes stronger than hesitation. This story begins on one of those extraordinary days. For many months, your soulmate had hidden their feelings behind ordinary conversations and quiet smiles. They attended family gatherings, served their community, encouraged friends through difficult seasons, and continued living as though nothing unusual was happening. Yet every evening, after the noise of the day faded away, your name quietly returned to their thoughts. They prayed for wisdom. They prayed for courage. Every time they almost reached out, fear whispered that it was safer to remain silent. They believed they were protecting both hearts, never realizing that silence was becoming the heaviest burden of all. Don't skip. Stay until the very end. This changes everything. One Saturday afternoon, the entire community gathered for a celebration honoring everyone who had spent the year serving families, children, and neighbors. Music filled the air. Children laughed beneath the old oak trees. Volunteers shared stories of hope, forgiveness, and faith. The atmosphere overflowed with gratitude, and no one expected that before the day ended, everyone present would witness something they would never forget. Your soulmate arrived early, helping arrange chairs, decorate the stage, and welcome guests with the same kindness they always showed. Outwardly they appeared calm, yet inside another battle was taking place. Every lesson learned during seasons of waiting returned to their mind. Every unanswered prayer reminded them that God had been preparing their heart. They quietly whispered, "Lord, if today is the day you want me to stop hiding, help me choose truth over fear." As the celebration continued, the organizer invited several volunteers to share how serving others had changed their lives. One after another, people spoke with gratitude. Then, unexpectedly, your soulmate's name was called. For a brief moment they froze. They had prepared nothing. Their hands trembled slightly as they walked toward the microphone. Hundreds of eyes turned toward them. The garden became wonderfully quiet. Taking one deep breath, they smiled gently. For a long time, they began, I believed courage meant never feeling afraid. But God has taught me something different. Courage is choosing truth even while your voice shakes. Every season of waiting has changed me. Every unanswered prayer has taught me patience. Every difficult chapter has reminded me that fear should never decide how we live. They paused, looking across the crowd. Then their eyes found you. The entire gathering seemed to disappear. Only one face remained. Their heart raced. Yet peace became stronger than fear. With tears filling their eyes, they spoke your name clearly. I don't want another day to pass pretending your kindness didn't change my life. I don't want gratitude to remain hidden anymore. I care about you deeply, and I'm no longer ashamed to say it. Whether tomorrow brings friendship, another chapter, or simply the blessing of knowing you, I never want silence to speak louder than truth again." The entire gathering became completely still. No one expected those words. Some people smiled through tears. Others quietly lowered their heads. Even the elderly mentor who had encouraged so many hearts throughout the years closed their eyes with gratitude. No one applauded immediately because everyone understood they had just witnessed something far more valuable than a dramatic confession. They had witnessed a fearful heart choosing honesty. For several long moments, no one spoke. Then you slowly stood and walked toward your soulmate. There was no hurry. No embarrassment. Only quiet understanding. Standing before them, you smiled warmly and softly said, "Thank you, not because you spoke in front of everyone, but because you finally allowed your heart to be honest." Your soulmate laughed gently through grateful tears. "I was terrified." You nodded. "I know. But sometimes the bravest thing we can do is tell the truth." The crowd quietly applauded. Not because someone had shouted their feelings, but because they had watched fear lose its power. Later that evening, the elderly mentor gathered everyone together and gently said, "Today we witnessed something important. The greatest miracle wasn't a public confession. The greatest miracle was a heart choosing truth instead of fear. Whether this becomes friendship, partnership, or simply lifelong gratitude, honesty will always leave us freer than silence." That night, your soulmate returned home and opened the familiar journal one final time. They slowly wrote, "Lord, today I learned that real courage is not measured by the response we receive. It is measured by our willingness to live honestly before you. Thank you for teaching me that truth spoken with humility is never wasted. Whatever tomorrow brings, let my life continue reflecting kindness, faith, integrity, and love." They gently closed the journal with a peaceful smile. Not because every question had already been answered, but because the burden of hiding had finally disappeared. Outside, the stars quietly filled the night sky. Inside, one grateful heart rested in complete peace, finally understanding that God's greatest miracles often begin the moment we stop allowing fear to write our story and instead choose to walk forward with honesty, faith, compassion, and hope. The morning after, the whole town heard the truth. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this fictional, faith-inspired story now reaches the morning after the confession that no one expected. Stay until the very end because what happened next changed everything. Something huge is waiting for you. The words spoken the previous evening continued echoing through every heart that had been present. Yet the greatest change wasn't happening in the town. It was quietly unfolding inside two hearts that no longer allowed fear to guide their future. The first rays of sunlight slowly filled your soulmate's room. They expected to wake with nervousness, wondering what everyone might think. Instead, they discovered something completely unexpected. Their heart felt lighter than it had in years. The same room surrounded them. The same journal rested beside the bed. The same morning had arrived. Yet inside, everything had changed because there were no more hidden words left to carry. Don't skip. Stay until the very end. This changes everything. Before reaching for the phone, your soulmate opened the familiar journal. Smiling softly, they whispered, "Lord, thank you for teaching me that honesty brings freedom long before it brings certainty. Help me continue choosing truth every day, not only when it feels easy, but especially when it requires courage. They slowly wrote, yesterday I thought I was risking everything. Today I realize I was simply laying down the burden I was never meant to carry forever. Later that morning, messages quietly began arriving from people who had attended the gathering. One volunteer wrote, "Your honesty reminded me to stop hiding my own struggles." Another simply said, "Yesterday encouraged more people than you probably realize." Your soulmate quietly smiled. They no longer needed approval. They simply felt grateful that one honest moment had encouraged other people to become more honest too. Meanwhile, your own morning unfolded with the same peaceful gratitude. Before leaving home, you spent several quiet moments in prayer. Father, thank you for every lesson that brought us here. Don't let yesterday become a reason for pride. Let it become another reason to keep walking with humility, compassion, and faith. Those words quietly remained in your heart throughout the day. Stay until the very end because something beautiful is waiting for you. That afternoon, both of you met once again at the community garden. There were no crowds, no stage, and no applause. Only blooming flowers, gentle wind moving through the trees, and children laughing nearby. Everything felt wonderfully ordinary. Your soulmate looked toward you with a peaceful smile. "How are you feeling today?" you asked. They quietly laughed. "Lighter. Yesterday I thought speaking would make life more complicated." They looked toward the flowers. Instead, it brought peace. You smiled warmly. That's what truth usually does. For several peaceful moments, neither of you spoke. There was no awkwardness. No pressure. The silence itself had become part of the friendship because it no longer needed to hide anything. Listen carefully. This changes everything. As the afternoon continued, the elderly mentor quietly walked toward both of you. Looking first at your soulmate and then toward you, they smiled gently. "Do you know what I noticed yesterday?" Neither of you answered. The crowd remembers the words. The mentor paused. Heaven remembers the heart that spoke them. Those simple words settled deeply within both of you. The mentor continued softly. People often believe courage is found in dramatic moments. But true courage is revealed the morning after, when we continue living with the same humility, kindness, and honesty that God helped us discover. Your soulmate quietly lowered their head. They understood. Yesterday had not been the destination. It had been the beginning. That evening, before going to sleep, your soulmate opened the journal one final time. "Lord, thank you for reminding me that yesterday's courage must become today's character. Don't let honesty become a single moment. Let it become the way I choose to live. Continue teaching me patience, humility, compassion, and unwavering faith so that every ordinary day reflects your goodness." Closing the journal, they looked toward the evening sky where the first stars slowly appeared. The future remained unwritten. Yet neither heart feared it anymore. Because they had finally discovered that God's greatest miracles are often not the loud moments everyone remembers. They are the quiet mornings that follow. When one faithful heart wakes up completely free. The person who quietly changed everything spoke at last. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this fictional, faith-inspired story now reaches the chapter where someone who had quietly watched everything from the beginning finally reveals what they had seen all along. Stay until the very end because what happened next changed everything. Something huge is waiting for you. Sometimes God's confirmation doesn't arrive through extraordinary signs. Sometimes it arrives through the gentle wisdom of someone who has silently witnessed every step of the journey. Several peaceful days passed after the unforgettable gathering. Life returned to its familiar rhythm. The community garden continued blooming. Children returned to the reading program. Volunteers greeted one another with warm smiles as though nothing unusual had happened. Yet inside both hearts, everything had changed. Fear no longer controlled your conversations. Gratitude quietly became part of every ordinary day. Don't skip. Stay until the very end. This changes everything. One afternoon, while arranging books inside the community center, the elderly mentor quietly approached both of you. Would you walk with me for a few moments? They asked. Without hesitation, both of you followed. The mentor slowly led you toward the old oak tree where so many prayers had been whispered throughout the year. The afternoon breeze gently moved through the branches while birds quietly sang overhead. For several long moments, no one spoke. Then the mentor smiled. I've been waiting for this conversation for a very long time. Your soulmate looked surprised. Waiting? The mentor nodded gently. Yes. Long before either of you understood what God was doing. I noticed something beautiful. Listen carefully. This changes everything. The mentor slowly looked across the peaceful garden. Do you remember the very first volunteer day? Both of you nodded. Neither of you knew each other. Neither of you spoke very much. Yet every time someone needed help, both of you quietly moved at exactly the same moment. They smiled. When one person encouraged someone who was discouraged, the other was doing the same thing somewhere else. When one chose patience, the other chose patience. When one quietly served without recognition, the other did exactly the same. The mentor paused. You weren't trying to imitate each other. God was teaching both hearts the very same lessons. Neither of you answered. The truth quietly settled inside both hearts. Stay until the very end because something beautiful is waiting for you. The mentor continued. Many people believe relationships begin when two people finally meet. They slowly shook their head. I've learned something different. Healthy relationships often begin long before introductions happen. They begin while God is shaping two separate hearts with the same values. Patience. Humility. Faith. Compassion. Honesty. Forgiveness. Only after those lessons begin taking root does He allow paths to cross. Your soulmate quietly lowered their head. Tears slowly filled their eyes. Not because of sadness. Because every difficult season suddenly made sense. Don't skip because something huge is waiting for you. Looking toward both of you, the mentor gently smiled. Yesterday everyone remembered the confession. Today I remember the journey that made the confession possible. Without every unanswered prayer. Without every season of waiting. Without every difficult lesson. Those words could never have been spoken with such peace. The afternoon became wonderfully quiet. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. The flowers gently moved in the breeze. Everything around you reflected the same lesson. Great things truly had grown quietly. Stay until the very end because what happened next changed everything. Before leaving, the mentor reached into a small worn Bible and removed an old bookmark. On the front were simple words. Faith grows slowly. On the back, written in faded handwriting, was another sentence. Never rush the chapters, God is still writing. The mentor handed it to your soulmate. Keep this close. Then look toward you. And remind one another of these words whenever life becomes uncertain again. Both of you quietly nodded. That evening, your soulmate opened the familiar journal once again. Lord, today you showed me that you were working long before I noticed. Every season that once confused me now reveals your wisdom. Thank you for preparing my heart before preparing my circumstances. Continue teaching me to remain faithful in ordinary days because I now understand those ordinary days become the foundation of extraordinary blessings. They gently closed the journal. Looking toward the evening sky, they smiled peacefully. For the first time, the future no longer felt like a mystery to solve. It felt like a journey already resting safely in God's hands. My beloved child, don't skip because the final chapter will bring this fictional, faith-inspired story to a peaceful conclusion, revealing how every prayer, every lesson, every act of kindness, and every season of waiting became part of a beautiful ending that neither heart could have imagined when the journey first began. The final lesson no one expected to hear. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this fictional, faith-inspired story now reaches the chapter where every lesson from the journey begins coming together. Stay until the very end because what happened next changed everything. Something huge is waiting for you. The greatest confirmations rarely arrive all at once. They quietly appear after countless ordinary days, reminding us that God has been working long before we recognize His hand. The morning after your conversation with the elderly mentor arrived with unusual peace. Neither you nor your soulmate felt the need to hurry toward tomorrow anymore. Something inside both hearts had settled. The questions that once demanded immediate answers had slowly become quiet trust. The fear that once whispered every night no longer carried the same power. Instead, gratitude filled the places where anxiety had once lived. Your soulmate quietly opened the familiar journal before sunrise. Lord, today I don't ask you for signs. I simply thank you for every lesson you have already given me. Help me remain faithful in ordinary moments because I now understand that ordinary faithfulness becomes extraordinary over time. Closing the journal, they smiled gently. The words no longer felt like a prayer written from uncertainty. They felt like the testimony of a heart that had learned to trust. Don't skip. Stay until the very end. This changes everything. Later that afternoon, another volunteer gathering brought everyone together once again. Nothing dramatic had been planned. Families arrived carrying homemade meals. Children gathered around the reading corner. Neighbors greeted one another warmly beneath the familiar trees. Everything felt wonderfully ordinary. Yet as the day unfolded, several people quietly approached your soulmate. One father smiled. "Last month my son was struggling with fear. After hearing your story, he told me he wanted to become someone who speaks honestly instead of hiding behind fear." Another elderly woman gently said, "Watching both of you continue serving after everything that happened reminded me that genuine character doesn't change after difficult moments. It becomes even more visible." Those simple conversations filled your soulmate's heart with quiet gratitude. Listen carefully. This changes everything. As the afternoon slowly passed, you found yourselves helping children plant another row of flowers beside the garden path. One little boy looked up curiously. "Why do we keep planting flowers every year?" You smiled. "Because someone who comes here next year deserves to enjoy their beauty." The child thought quietly for a moment before asking, "So we're helping people we've never even met?" Your soulmate smiled warmly. "Exactly." The little boy happily continued planting. Neither of you realized how deeply those simple words reflected your entire journey. Every prayer, every act of kindness, every lesson had been preparing blessings you couldn't yet see. Stay until the very end because something beautiful is waiting for you. As evening approached, the elderly mentor gathered everyone together one final time. Looking across every familiar face, they quietly said, "When this year began, many of you prayed for God to change your lives." They paused. "Today I want you to notice something. He certainly changed circumstances for some of you. But his greatest work happened inside your hearts. Some of you became more patient. Some became more forgiving. Some became more compassionate. Some learned courage. Some discovered hope again." The mentor smiled gently. "Those are miracles too." The entire gathering became wonderfully quiet. No applause interrupted the moment. Only grateful hearts. Don't skip because something huge is waiting for you. Before everyone returned home, your soulmate quietly walked toward the old oak tree one last time. Resting a hand against its weathered trunk, they whispered, "Do you know something?" You smiled. "What?" They softly laughed. "When I first came here, I believed I was waiting for someone else." They looked toward the peaceful garden. "Now I understand I was also waiting to become someone different." You nodded. "And maybe that's why God never hurried the journey." The evening breeze gently moved through the leaves above. Neither of you spoke again. The silence already carried every answer your hearts needed. That night, your soulmate opened the journal once more. "Lord, today I finally understand why you never rushed this story. You weren't simply leading two people toward one another. You were teaching two hearts how to love with patience, honesty, humility, forgiveness, compassion, and faith. Thank you for every ordinary day that quietly became extraordinary because you were present within it. Whatever chapters remain ahead, let every page reflect your goodness." They gently closed the journal. For the first time, it remained closed. Not because there was nothing left to write, but because fear had finally finished telling its story. My beloved child, don't skip because the final chapter will reveal the beautiful ending to this fictional, faith-inspired journey, where every unanswered prayer, every season of waiting, every quiet act of service, and every ordinary conversation comes together in a peaceful conclusion that reminds us God's greatest blessings often begin long before we recognize them. The beautiful ending God had been writing all along. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this is the final chapter of this fictional, faith-inspired journey. Stay until the very end because what happened next changed everything. Looking back, both you and your soulmate finally understood that the greatest miracle was never the public confession, the unexpected conversation, or the quiet moments beneath the old oak tree. The greatest miracle was the way God patiently transformed two ordinary hearts through seasons of waiting, unanswered prayers, faithful service, and quiet obedience. The weeks became months, and life continued with its familiar rhythm. The community garden flourished with flowers planted by many faithful hands. The reading program welcomed new children every season. Families who had once arrived carrying heavy burdens now greeted one another like old friends. Hope quietly spread through ordinary acts of kindness, proving that love leaves its deepest mark not through dramatic moments, but through consistent faithfulness. Don't skip. Stay until the very end. This changes everything. One peaceful evening, after another day of serving together, you and your soulmate slowly walked through the garden where so many chapters of this story had unfolded. The setting sun painted the sky with soft shades of gold and crimson. Gentle laughter echoed in the distance as children played among the flowers. Everything felt wonderfully ordinary. Your soulmate quietly smiled. Do you know what surprises me the most? You looked at them. What? I spent so much time praying for God to bring someone into my life. They paused for a moment. I never realized He was first teaching me how to become someone worthy of protecting that blessing. You smiled gently. Maybe that's why the waiting mattered. They nodded. Every difficult season became preparation instead of punishment. For several peaceful moments, neither of you spoke. The silence no longer carried questions. It carried complete peace. Listen carefully. This changes everything. As the evening continued, the elderly mentor quietly joined you beneath the familiar oak tree. Looking at both of you with a warm smile, they softly said, "My dear friends, people often believe love begins the day two people meet." The mentor gently shook their head. "I've learned something different. Love often begins long before that, when two separate hearts choose honesty over fear, forgiveness over bitterness, humility over pride, and faith over doubt." They looked toward the blooming garden. God prepared this place one seed at a time. He prepared both of your hearts the very same way. Those simple words settled deeply within both of you. No applause followed. Only grateful silence. Stay until the very end because something beautiful is waiting for you. Before everyone returned home, your soulmate opened the familiar journal one final time. Slowly they wrote, "Lord, thank you for every unanswered prayer that became wisdom. Thank you for every delay that became preparation. Thank you for every challenge that strengthened compassion instead of fear. Today I understand that your greatest gifts are rarely rushed. They grow quietly through faithful days, honest conversations, patient hearts, and ordinary acts of love. Whatever tomorrow brings, I choose to continue walking with gratitude, integrity, kindness, and complete trust in you. With a peaceful smile, they gently closed the journal. Not because the story had ended, but because fear would never write another page. My beloved child, as this fictional, faith-inspired story comes to its close, remember this timeless truth: God's greatest blessings are often prepared in quiet seasons. He shapes character before opening new doors. He teaches patience before revealing purpose. He strengthens faith before revealing the next chapter. Every sincere prayer matters. Every act of kindness has value. Every season of waiting carries meaning, even when we cannot yet see it. As the first stars appeared above the peaceful garden, both hearts stepped into the future with confidence, not because every detail of tomorrow had been revealed, but because they had learned to trust the one who lovingly guides every tomorrow. The waiting had become wisdom. The silence had become understanding. The fear had become courage. And the confession that once seemed impossible had become the beginning of a friendship built on honesty, mutual respect, shared faith, and enduring hope. And so this fictional story ends with peace instead of worry, gratitude instead of regret, and hope instead of fear. The greatest miracle was never that one heart shouted its love before a crowd. The greatest miracle was that two hearts allowed God to transform them before they walked forward together. Every lesson had a purpose. Every season carried grace. Every prayer was heard. And every faithful step became part of a beautiful story that continues beyond the final page, one ordinary day, one quiet act of love, and one faithful step at a time.